Good afternoon. I'm Michael Millward. It's great to be here. I'm just going to move things around a little bit so that I can see everything that is here. I can see that there are people making comments in the chat box, which is great. Please feel free to make any comments you like as we go through. Agree with me, disagree with me. That's all what it's all about. That's great. And I've got quite a lot of stuff to talk about actually today, overcoming the barriers to workplace learning. After a career in training and development in HR is one of those issues which is quite important. I think we assume everybody wants to learn, whereas it's not actually always the case, and people can be very good at acting, wanting to learn, regardless of whether they do or not. I'm wondering about how many trainers we have in the room and how many HR people we have in the room. So if you're a trainer or an HR person, please put something in the chat box, just so we get an idea of the type of balance that we're dealing with, and then we can move on. Right. Next. Right. Okay. Whoa, it's quite a collection. Right. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, let me tell you about my career. There's a big number right in the middle of this slide, which is 1981. That's when I started in my HR career in the Yorkshire Regional Health Authority. I did all of my IPM qualifications while I worked in the NHS, then went off into the corporate world and ended up working all over the world. I have worked everywhere around the world apart from South America at the moment. Came back into the UK at the start of this century, did a master's degree in HR, and set up a company called Abeceder, which is an employee management company. Abeceder, it's a Latin word. It means to put into logical order or deal with the rudiments of a subject. Subject we put into logical order is employee management. We do this by providing information, products, services, and expertise. You can see some of the names that we work with there. I'm an active volunteer with the FCIPD. I used to be the chair of a branch, did that for 6 years, and now I'm currently working on projects related to the development of volunteers, services for HR leaders, and the establishment of an alumni group for past branch chairs. You'll see things like the Simpsons logo on that slide. That's because I worked with the Simpsons organization to create the only business-to-business learning product which Gracie Films have ever approved. It uses Homer Simpson, the world's most famous and yet least competent health and safety manager, to create learning resources related to health and safety. Did something similar with Bloomberg, and I've done quite a lot of things with the BBC in talking this sort of thing on local radio and local television and national television as well. So my whole career in one slide, a lot of it spent in training and development, a lot of it spent in generalist HR things as well. Now, I was sitting down and thinking about what will people be expecting? Will they be expecting a list of the reasons why people don't engage with training and ways in which they can overcome those? And I thought, yes, they probably will. And so I've included that within this presentation. But before we get there, I think that the first thing we need to do is not to assume that the person to blame is the learner. We first of all need to look at ourselves as trainers. Problem is that what many trainers do is provide what they do rather than what the learner or the organization actually needs. They don't understand us. It's just so easy to convince them that what we're providing is what they need. The people that we're working for, the employees that we have, the managers that we're working alongside don't understand what it is that we do. They can't do it themselves. We're the experts. So it's very easy for us to convince them that what we do is what they need. But I wonder, what is the average return on investment for learning and development activities? Any ideas? Don't worry, Carol, we're glad that you're here. But any ideas onto what is the average return on investment for a learning and development activity within a British organisation? Any ideas? If you've got an idea, please put that into the chat box and we'll see what sort of ideas that we can come up with. The percentage return on investment for the average training and development activity in British industry. 40%. Right, okay. Any higher, lower than 40%? Less than 10%, David. Ooh, he's having a pessimistic Tuesday. 15%. Right, okay. 20%? 25%. A total guess at 15%. Right. Well, total guess is actually one of the things that is quite poignant because we might have our happy sheets We can all show the happy sheet, and it's the easiest thing to generate is a really good report from a happy sheet. Spend a day with people telling them how great they are. They're going to tell you that you're wonderful as well. But really, the research that I've found suggests that it's somewhere between 10 and 30% is the return on investment. But we don't actually know. We don't actually know what the return on investment in our training activities is, because we very rarely conduct a proper analysis of the return on investments. Happy sheets, yes, but return on investment, no. My last webinar also looked at this issue, and you can find that on the Shorebird website as well, so go and take a look at that. But making training relevant to work activities is a great way to break down the barriers to learning. If it's relevant to what I do every day, if it's going to impress my boss, if it's going to make my life easier, I'm going to get involved in it. If it's not, if you can't convince me of that, you're going to have a big obstacle to overcome. We need to look at the problems not from our perspective as trainers, but as the training need becomes a business performance issue. It's not the training need we need to look at, it's the business performance analysis. What may appear to be a lack of skill may be a lack of knowledge, or a lack of leadership, or a lack of motivation. The problem that the employee has may not be the way in which the instruction is communicated. Sorry, I'll say that again. The problem may be the way in which the instruction is communicated, not an inability to fulfill the instruction. And we forget about this is not just one issue. It is a whole range of different things, creating the obstacle to learning, creating the lack of performance, creating the lack of impact that we as trainers, business development people, internal business development people have within organizations. So, looking at yourself. Well, Charles Jennings did a lot of research into this and identified 5 barriers to effective learning in organizations, which are centered around the trainer. The first point was, are you asking people to change faster than you are prepared to? Very often we're asking people within organizations to do something different. We're asking them to create better performance. And yet, as trainers, we go back to the tried, old, tested methods of development. We'll put them in a classroom. We'll put them on an exercise. We'll give them role plays. We'll do all sorts of things which we're comfortable doing, but actually may not be the best process to achieve the business outcome. Right? So, are you focused on the input or the output? I meet so many trainers who are focused on what they do rather than what actions actually are going to achieve the aim that the organization has for the learner. Right? Are you doing what is convenient for you as a trainer? Right? So, are you doing what you know or what you have the time and resources to do rather than learning yourself about what the organization may need? And team working and team building is a favorite type of training for trainers to deliver. But does learning about team theories help people work as a team as much as establish shared visions, goals, and supporting those with shared outcomes and experiences? Right? Our focus on what we can do rather than what we can enable people to do is one of the things which creates the barriers to learning. The alignment. Now, I'm going to do quite a lot of things over the next few months on the alignment of HR activities and training and development activities with business objectives, and bringing in quite a few people who've done quite a lot of research into this subject to meet you and to actually interview them and explore these issues. But we often talk about HR business partnerships, and many people who describe themselves as an HR business partner have never read the book. They don't really quite know what it's all about. But I think we need to start talking about learning and development business partnerships as well. And one of the ways of overcoming barriers to learning is very quickly to look at what it is we're trying to achieve. What is the business objective we're trying to address rather than the learning objective? So focus on the business objectives. You'll create a learning activity, which might not be a training course, which people are going to engage with because they can see the outcome of that helping the business, helping them contribute to the business. That is one of the things that is quite important. And then this new word that I have found, right? Richard is looking at this wondering like what it is. What does this mean? Obfuscation, right? Well, I looked it up. It's my favorite word at the moment. I'm going to try and find ways of fitting it into sentences. But I can see you all Googling it now. Essentially, how many trainers do you know who use the training experience to demonstrate what they know rather than transfer the knowledge to other people? Right? How many trainers do you know who seem to have a talent for making things more confusing, bewildering, or stupefying, make people feel stupid whilst they're trying to learn? Obfuscation. I'm going to check the phonetic spelling of this, but it basically, I think it's one thing that we all do as trainers. We try and demonstrate how much we know about it rather than sharing the knowledge. We try to overcomplicate it because that justifies our existence. And if you have a trainer who's going to tell you how much they know rather than how to share their knowledge and how to apply what they're showing you within a business environment, you're going to end up with this obfuscation. I think I said it correctly there, obfuscation. Situations where this will happen is where it becomes, people fail to engage with it. They've just totally remote from the business objective, and this is where you get this type of activity happening. I've seen so many trainers who have failed in this area, and it's, you don't need to prove how much you know. You already are at the front of the room. You're the one telling people or explaining to people how they can learn something. The aim is to get them to learn, not to remember what it is that you've told them. And this is where we get into this retention of information. People retain the information that is useful to them rather than just what you happen to have told them. Right? Now, then we get into the objections to learning. And these are not necessarily barriers. They're not necessarily tangible, but they are things which will impact the way in which people will learn. So as we're going through it, if you've got any questions, any comments, anything you agree with or disagree with, please just put something in the chat box. I'll go back to it and we can cover it and we can go into things in more detail. But the objections to learning, the first one that I put up there is the source of the learning. It's rather poignant at the moment where the news is all full of various different hate crimes, but just to exaggerate things, but personality issues may seem trivial, are frequent targets of learning defenses. We tune out people because the person speaking, writing, teaching, or informing us is too arrogant, too wimpy, too timid, too quirky, or too whatever it is we don't like. Stereotyping is also common defense against learning. We dismiss a message because of stereotyping about the source of the message. There are a host of stereotypes we can use: race, gender, sexuality, physical appearance, culture, religion, all sorts of various different things which say, I am not going to be able to learn anything from that person. One of the most common ones of these is, I am not going to be able to learn anything from somebody who's an academic. What do they know about business? If they could run a business, they'd be in business, not sitting in a college or a university. The source of the learning, make sure that the source of the learning is positioned correctly with people so that they understand the value of the source. Right? But the culture of your organization will also have an impact on the type of trainers, the type of learning activities that you can engage those people in, depending upon the source. So if you have a very male-dominated organization, bringing a female trainer or female resources, written resources into the organization will not have the same credibility as something created by a male trainer. A sweeping statement, I know, but there is lots of evidence to support those sorts of things. Defending against the learning because of the content. Sometimes it is the content of the message that causes us to put up barriers. Right? Probably the most common content issue is belief content. We are more likely to defend against learning when the message we're hearing goes against our own beliefs, even these messages often generate the best attention. Right? Extra effort messages, ones that may cause more work for us, are defeated again. We'll think about doing a good job, performing well, and somebody comes along and tells us there's a different, better way of doing things. If the suggestion causes more work, some of us will dismiss the message, or even if it causes us to learn something, we'll dismiss it because we can't be bothered with it. Finding rationalized old ways of doing things instead. Messages that cause embarrassment also raise barriers. When someone points out that we're doing something inappropriately, inadequately, inefficiently, or incorrectly, our own pride may prevent us from responding to the message. I had an instance of this last week, and I'm not going to tell you about it, but it happened, and when I was researching into this, I thought, yes, that is what's happened. I learned from it. I didn't like learning from it, but I learned from it, and it was the content of the message that somebody gave me that, so I got my hackles up, to use an old Yorkshire expression. The message itself, the way a message is delivered can be central to defending activities. Past experience of being in a classroom can switch people off. That can switch people off from the learning experience itself. There are likely to be more learning defenses than you can imagine, more than you've ever experienced. The point is not to identify them all, but you are to begin to get a sense of how you may actively prevent learning by these objections to learning, which are often not voiced. They're very subliminal. They're not very tangible very often, but you'll pick up signals to them in ways in which people behave, the words that they say, how they sit in a room, how they react to your invitation to learn. Taking down these objections to learnings means just that, not letting these defenses arise the next occasion in which they might occur, because a certain amount of motivation is required to want to remove your defenses, and that is where it is important to learn about learning obstacles or the barriers to learning. So, barriers to learning. I have identified 10, and I'm going to whittle through these, and we'll put the recording up. But the first one is independence. It's crucial to respect your participants' experiences and accomplishments. Dependence isn't something that adults take for granted, it's something they're proud of, and they don't appreciate it being undermined. Don't talk down to your participants or treat them as children. Right? If you treat them as children, talk down to them, they become adults, they put the barrier up, you're not respecting me. The negative feelings about training, learning by avoiding situations that test your learner or situations that have a risk of failure. For some adults, school wasn't a positive experience, and you may find yourself working with people who become hostile, upset even, because they believe they aren't good learners or because they think they're being tested, especially when they're in a group of peers. Right? Never forget that not everyone had a great experience at school, college, or wherever it is that they went, and even when they've had previous workplace experiences, learning is not always a positive experience. You have to build that into your planning of learning. Preoccupations and mental disorders, and mental distractions, emotional distractions, People will be distracted by what is going on outside of what they can see from the room where you're talking to them, where you're expecting them to learn. They will be distracted by things which are happening at work, things that are happening at home. You have to allow people time to accommodate those within their learning situation. You have to create something which will remove the tension, the anxiety. You have to begin working on this as soon as you get into the learning situation and creating something that is more peaceful, where people can focus and forget about what is happening elsewhere. Right? In terms of resistance to change, sometimes attitudes have to change before permanent learning can take place. The only way to persuade people to make such basic changes is to show them that the new ways of behaving are more productive than the old. When they see the results, their attitudes will most likely change. Design your courses, activities, whatever they are, to allow people to explore and discover the benefits of the new strategies. Don't preach at them. Allow them to explore and learn as adults. The fifth one, selective filters. Adults only pay attention to what is relevant to them. If you try and give them loads and loads of information, they will switch off. And they'll say it's too much, what is the relevance of this? So only focus on what is actually needed. And we saw, as explained last time, more and more people looking for just-in-time learning, learning in ways in which are going to meet their needs rather than simply fulfilling a tick-in-the-box learning experience. Right? Unclear motivations is the next one. Best training sessions satisfy learners' needs. They solve their problem and can be used immediately in the workplace, just in time. Right? Most adults attend courses or get involved in learning because they have a specific need or want to learn how to solve a problem. Often, what they want is something that they will make them more effective at their job. Make sure you tell your audience what's in it for them, tell them what they're going to learn and how it will help them work. The fear of participation. Even people who normally enjoy socializing are inclined to get cold feet when it comes to taking part in learning activities, the dreaded role plays, the discussions, these sorts of things. This is due to the risk involved in exposing a weakness or revealing a fault. However, if you don't participate, you probably won't learn much. The wise trainer, which I hope you all are, creates an atmosphere that keeps anxiety levels as low as possible. Make no judgment, make positive comments and reinforce the desired behavior, and only offer constructive criticism. FOMO. Fear of missing out. Right? They could be worried about missing out something else that was might be happening elsewhere. And in work, missing out on something that's happening away from work, you have to create something which will mean that the learning activity is more interesting. There will be people writing essays and doing their revision for exams whilst they really want to be watching the Euros, the European Cup finals. But yeah, the qualification, the exam, the revision, all that sort of stuff has to be made more interesting, more useful. Strongly established habits, getting people out of the habit that, well, we've always done it this way, that's all right. That can be difficult. And the fear of failure is the classic one. People often feel they are certain to fail and sometimes doubt their ability to complete the tasks involved in the learning. You must be certain that everything is explained to the participants and that objectives are clearly stated. The participants should realize that they've set their own standards. You should always let them know if there will be a formal test following the training. Failure is not what's important, it's the learning experience, and very often we learn more when we fail than we do from succeeding, but people don't see it that way. Right? The image of learning inside an organization. I worked in an organization once where I was given the job of setting up a training department. I was told it was a bit of an ejector seat job because the founder of the organization saw training as something that people should do at night school, like what he had done. Within 12 months, he gave me over £1 million as a training budget and asked me to train his sons how to be managers. You have to make sure that learning inside your organization has a positive image. You have to make sure that the people at the top of the organization are seen to be learning. And you need to try and make sure that learning is seen as part of a job, not something which happens away from it. If you can get your managing director to tell people that they're going on a course, this is what they aim to achieve from it, this is what they're aiming to do when they get back, you will start to create curiosity amongst your people in learning, finding out about new things. Right? You'll have to have a purpose to the learning, and it's not just the fact that you got involved in a learning activity that is important. It's about creating something when somebody finishes the learning activity. What are they going to share with their colleagues? How are they going to be different? What are they going to add to the organization? How will their life be simpler? You need to include these in your planning of learning, not something that you do whilst people are learning. It's in the planning of learning. You need to have the inspiration. Celebrate your learning heroes. Find the people who have learnt something. Find those people who've then found themselves doing a better job, being promoted, getting a pay rise, doing more interesting things, and use those to inspire. At the moment, I'm doing research into volunteering. I'm looking for people who have found volunteering, helped them in their career, used volunteering as a career development tool. We're going to be celebrating that through the CIPD. So it's like you need the inspirations. You need to encourage people to learn. It's not an arduous task. It's not something that you have to do. It's something that is worth doing, something that's going to add to your career and your performance at work. Right? The promoting learning. Well, prioritize learning goals and objections to learning. So you actually end up like, this is the major learning goal. I'm doing things with my hands here, but this is almost doing a bar chart type of thing. This is the major learning goal. This is the minor learning objection to that learning. Can we skirt around it? Do we have to go over it? Or how do we address it? Is it important to address it, or will it fade away, or is this something that is really going to stop people learning? I had a situation once where a senior manager pulled together a course because his manager told me this is what they need to learn, this is the type of activities they need to get involved in, and then this manager said, I'm not getting involved in that. I said, why not? Nobody's asked me what I need to learn. Nobody's asked me to help design this. You're just telling me what it is. You need to research what it is that I think I need to learn as much as what you need to learn. And that became the objection to the learning, was you have not involved me in the design of what you're going to engage me in, so I'm not particularly taking any ownership of it. That was insurmountable. We had to start again and include him and his colleagues in the design of the learning. We learned a lot from that experience. Don't try and pigeonhole, don't try and force people down a route. Include them in the learning, the design and creation of the learning that you want them to achieve. Build the obstacle removal into the learning promotion. So don't just tell people the great things, also tell them the things which are the obstacles to it. We've seen at the moment with the European referendum campaign, everybody's telling us all the terrible things that are going to happen, but very few people are telling us the good things that could happen. It's the same thing. If you're told just one side of the story, you switch off. You start to suspect what you're not being told, and you start to think, right, okay, I'm not going to engage in it. give people a balanced view of the learning activity, and they're more likely to engage in it. Position it alongside what's in it for them as well as what's in it for the organization. Position the difficulties, the challenges, as well as the benefits. Right? And then you need some strategies for finessing or minimizing versus removing the obstacles. It's very straightforward. Some things you can remove, like with health and safety. You can remove the risk, you can remove the hazard. If you can't, you have to manage it, and you have to create a strategy for managing those obstacles which you cannot remove. Do not ignore them. Do not try and believe that they do not exist. They do, but have some sort of strategy for saying, okay, this is a problem. Whether it's the location that you need people to go to, whether it's the time that they've got to get involved in it, whether it's the time of the day, whether it's the resources that are going to be difficult to find, whatever it is, be open and upfront about it, be honest about it, and people will more likely to engage within the process, right, because you've been open and upfront and honest with them. I know that is a whistle-stop tour through a very big subject, and I think I might try and persuade Richard to let us go back at some time in the future and look at it again. But I've been told we have half an hour. We're just getting around to 1:30, so I'm feeling rather chuffed with myself that we've finished on time. But please, if you have any questions, we have time for any questions or comments or feedback. I'm very happy to answer any questions. Yes, we're going to